Assalamu alaikum and welcome to Game Changer. I am Mariam Zia. In today's program, we will be exploring the complex and often contentious relations between Pakistan and India. Of course, when we talk about Pakistan and India relations, both countries have a shared history. But Kashmir issue remains a major source of contention between the two countries, and of course we know that both countries are nuclear armed giants of South Asian region, but still this Kashmir dispute have impacted the relations between the two countries, and it has larger impacts on the region as well. So in today's program we will be exploring these relations between the two countries. Of course there are many dimensions to these relations between the two countries, especially after we know that India unilaterally revoked the status of Kashmir by articles 370 and 35A. In today's program we will be talking about that as well, and we will be talking about the history and recent developments between Pakistan and India relations and what it means for the region. To discuss this and more, I am joined in the studios by former Ambassador Ms. Naila Chauhan, and with her I am joined by Dr. Tughril Jameen, who is expert in international affairs, and we are joined online by Mr. Shahyar Khan, who is expert in international affairs. Thank you very much to you all for joining in today's program, and a very warm welcome to the program. Ambassador Naila, let me start with you. How do you see the recent developments between Pakistan and India relations, and what are the complexities of these relations between the two countries, especially if we see it in the context of recent statements made by Indian External Affairs Minister?
I would start off by not linking the two, but showing the two approaches towards peace. As far as Pakistan is concerned, the foreign minister decided to go to Goa to participate in SCO. It was a very clear message that Pakistan is for regional cooperation, for security, for peace, and for development. A lot of Indian media misinterpreted it, but as far as we are concerned, we have always taken positive steps. They even went to the extent of saying, oh, there was no handshake, and the foreign minister very politely said, well, I'm glad they are following our traditions because in Sindh we don't shake hands. And the Indian foreign minister didn't shake hands with anyone, so it was not any discrimination in that perspective. As far as India is concerned, they always have a very belligerent approach. Their media had created a hype, they were misinterpreting it, they went to the extent of saying that this might compromise Pakistan's position on G20, which isn't correct.
Of course. Because
the G20 working group on tourism is being, at least they are saying they are going to hold it in Srinagar, and a youth conference in Ladakh. So they are basically testing waters on how international community will react to it. Pakistan created that sensitivity at international fora, that is a disputed territory, holding an international conference in that terrain,
of course,
is a violation of UN resolutions. And interesting enough, the resolutions that were drafted after India took the case to UN Security Council.
In 1949, of course.
So they have never been consistent. They're always, going in circles, because they're the one who took it to UN, and now they're the one who are violating it. As far as Pakistan is
Indian
concerned,
minister even went as far as to say that those resolutions and similar agreements, that is part of the history. And what do you say to those statements?
History repeats itself. So
of course,
if you say it's part of history, we have to learn from history. And to move forward, we have to develop on it. You can't say, oh, I just woke up and it was a dream and it's over. It's history. It is based on facts. It's based on experiences. So they have to recognize that, and they are responsible for it. And if India is aspiring to be a global power
and policeman of this region, of course,
it cannot. But as a global economic power, they have to demonstrate responsibility. because a bigger power, it's 5 times the size of Pakistan. So there's no competition or comparison as such. The only problem is the injustice, the unfinished agenda of partition.
Of course, we will be talking about that and talking about historical experiences, and like Ambassador Saiba rightly pointed out, that history repeats itself. So, Dr. Yamin, what are some of the key events, historically speaking, that have shaped the relationship, the diplomatic relationship between Pakistan and India?
First of all, the partition. The partition was arbitrary. The person who was sent to make a report on it had never been to India
region,
before.
Of course.
He had an upset stomach. So
yes.
the award was not correct. And then Mountbatten was again a very, very partial person. He also used his influence to make sure that India has a corridor to Kashmir. So it was deliberate. The way they partitioned India against the sentiments of the people, that was wrong, and that led to this dispute on Kashmir, which doesn't seem to be resolving. And now from current history, we know that the reason that India went to the Security Council was that the war was not going well. That is why Modi does not want those papers to be published. The letters that was written by General Butcher to Pandit Jawaharlal Nehru, he was very clear. He said the war is not going well, and if we continue fighting, we are going to ultimately lose it. So they did not publish it. But coming back to what are the events that shaped the relationship between Pakistan and India, Pakistan has for a very long time been trying to negotiate with India, and all governments, irrespective of their political stripe, have tried to reach out to India. There have been handshakes, reluctant handshakes or whatever, but the governments have been trying to speak to India. But there is some kind of false notion with the Indians. They think that probably because they're such a big market, they need not speak to Pakistan. In their minds,
of course. And do you think this false notion have been propagated by the current BJP government? Of course, we know that even after 2014 and for the past decade, we have seen that India has hardened its policy towards Pakistan.
Ms. Zia, the Indians were never very soft towards you. They never wanted to talk to, whether it was Nehru or whether it was Modi or whether Indira Gandhi. Indira Gandhi, actually, the daughter of Nehru, actually divided your country into two.
Course.
She was such a, I don't want to use an expletive for her, but what she did great disharm to my country. So none of them. And again, if the Gandhis again come back to power, which I doubt, they'll again have a very hard stance towards Pakistan, because it does not sell with the local domestic audience unless you tell them that, look, we are all hawks. People will vote for them. Otherwise, they will. If the slightest inkling they show that they are soft on Pakistan, they are going to lose the next elections. And even now, this discourteous external affairs minister, discourteous, undiplomatic, so and so. He did it because the Karnataka election is just next door. So they always play the Pakistan bogey. In our election campaigns, India is never the issue.
Of course.
Never
India
the
has
issue.
never been a factor in Pakistan's
domestic
politics.
Not at all. And we are least bothered about what India is or what India can do to us. We know that if India wages a war against us, they are going to get a bloody nose, and that's what they got in February 2019. You see, that could have been a step up the nuclear ladder. It didn't happen because the aircraft was downed, the pilot was captured, and he was sent back after a fantastic cup of tea.
Of course.
So it's a false notion that Congress party or BJP or anybody, nobody is sincere to you, nobody is for you, they are for India. So that should be very clear to us.
Right, of course. Mr. Shayar, when we talk about India's foreign policy, how do you see that India's stance towards Pakistan have hardened over the last decade, or it has been the case in the history as well? How do you see the role of BJP's current government in this foreign policy towards Pakistan and for other neighbors in the region as well?
So Mariam, if you basically look at the whole philosophy of the BJP, we have to understand that their whole agenda is not only anti-Muslim, but it's also like anti-minorities. So it's a very right-wing, pro-Hindu religious organization. So that is like something that we have to understand, because we basically tend to believe that India looks at it from a Pakistani lens, but they look at it from a non-Hindu lens. And any ethnicity or religious group that is not Hindu is not acceptable to this right-wing party. And when we talk about the recent foreign minister's visit to the SCO, we also have to note that even previously in March 2023, India blocked Pakistan's participation in one seminar of SCO, which was very unprecedented, because at the forum of SCO, bilateral issues cannot be discussed. And we discussed that in the last program as well. And this move was in the context of the forum, which basically was called SCO, Armed Forces Contribution to Military, Medicine, Healthcare and Pandemics. And we were like discussing that, and they created an issue on the map of Kashmir, and they basically disinvited Pakistan. So this is like not something that just like happened very recently in regards to our FM's visit. And this like whole India's move on planning a G20 tourism working group meeting in Sri Lanka, that's also like a move that has expressed, Pakistan has expressed strong reservations over India's decision, because it's an internationally disputed and recognized disputed territory. India's behavior has been irresponsible, and it's one of the moves in the latest series of self-serving measures to perpetuate its illegal occupation of Jammu and Kashmir. It's also in sheer disregard and in violation of the UN Security Council resolutions, and in violations of principles of the UN Charter, international law.
So, Mr. Shayyar, this is clearly the violation of United Nations Security Council's resolution regarding a disputed territory. But how do you see the response of regional powers and global powers to India's response and for conducting or trying to conduct this G20 summit in this illegally occupied Kashmir?
So I completely agree with Madam Naila's comment that India is trying to test the waters and to see if the international community will accept this move. And generally the burden is now on the international community on whether they will condone this blatant violation of UN resolutions. And I also agree with our respected panelists that will economic compulsions and a large market or a large economy or economic dividends, will they trump human rights? So that burden or that onus will be on the international community on whether they will condone this act or not. And as the panelists also rightly pointed out, that this is election year in Pakistan as well, and in India as well. So this rhetoric, this like very negative rhetoric on both sides will increase. And India is like using this whole rhetoric to basically gain votes in their electorate. The sad part is that India is a very large economy, and there's no denying that. It's a large market as well, and there's no denying that. And India has like this grandiose vision that it basically places itself as in a leadership position in this area. But unfortunately, what I
India is trying to act as hegemon of the region, but of course, how international community is acting and Pakistan's role in trying to create a conducive environment, and of course, like Foreign Minister Bilawal Bhutto Zardari has also rightly said that, pointed out that onus is now on India to create a conducive environment for the talks. We will be talking more about Pakistan-India relations and the complexities of these relations after. Welcome back. We are talking about complexities of Pakistan-India relations and its impact on the region at large. Ambassador Naila, when we talk about these relations, how do you see, what are some of the key challenges that have impacted these relations, and specifically, like Shahriyar Saab also mentioned about the domestic politics of India. What are your views on that?
I agree with Shahriyar Saab that they have used it as an election issue. And I also agree with Dr. Saab that irrespective of which government it is, in last 7 decades, it's visible that they use Pakistan as a bête noire for their elections. However, the current government has Hindutva agenda, and RSS is a militant group. I mean, look at Pulwama incident. What happened there? They were willing to kill their own soldiers to blemish Pakistan. They could go to that extent, and you can see what their acting governor of Kashmir, Mr. Malik, stated on it, that they were not given the full support, and when he raised the issue with the Prime Minister, he said, keep quiet.
Of course.
Why would a Prime Minister say keep quiet? Lest they had an agenda beyond what was visible, and it was basically to blemish Pakistan and to isolate Pakistan, and you can see they have failed very badly. You're right now having a trilateral meeting of the Chinese foreign minister, the Afghan acting foreign minister, and our foreign minister. You are also having bilateral 4th round of strategic
talks
dialogue
with China. Of course.
You're also having talks with Afghan representatives, including their commerce acting minister and industry minister. So as far as Pakistan is concerned, you can see the distinct difference in approaches, that we are looking for peace, we are looking for economic development of the people and for progress. But that doesn't mean you're on a weak wicket that you're looking for it.
Of course, Pakistan has always...
You are peace-loving country. This is your foreign policy statement, that you want friendship with all, enemyhood with none. So we have been pursuing it. It's not because you're afraid or that you're lesser. You are just sincere in your agenda, while you see that that is not reciprocated from the other side.
And that has never been reciprocated by India, if we see in the history as well. How do you see that? Of course, India has always tried to destabilize Pakistan, and capture of Kulbhushan Jadhav is a prime example of this. How do you see what is the agenda of India behind all these efforts? Because Pakistan has always advocated for regional connectivity, regional prosperity. What are your views?
There are 3 points that I would like to bring across. One, India wants to demonize Pakistan by constantly talking about us being the supporter of terrorism. And that is what they, that, sorry, a very undiplomatic fellow said, Jay Shankar said when our foreign minister was visiting there. One is that they want to isolate us, they want to demonize us, they want to raise a lot of accusations against us. Secondly, they want to keep us destabilized. So they will continue sending fifth columnists, they will continue supporting the Baloch separatists, the Taliban, etc. Anybody who can create trouble within Pakistan.
But let's talk, of course, India has always made such efforts to destabilize Pakistan. But if we look at internal situation and internal politics of India, that is also not very pleasant to see. Like there is a lot of intolerance in the Indian society. How do you see that? Of course, not only Muslims, but other minorities in India are also being prosecuted.
Yeah. There has recently been...
And that is, we are talking about the largest democracy, so-called largest democracy of the world.
You're right. There are many problems within India, and you you're well aware of what happened in Manipur recently, where the Christians were killed. Christians are not Muslims. So all the Western countries are Christians, so their sympathies should be with the Christians. So they don't care at all about whether they're Christians, whether they're Sikhs, whether they're Muslims, whether they are Buddhists. They will do what they feel like doing. But this is one way of diverting the attention of the world from their own problems at home, because the entire northern, this northeastern area is insurgency prone. There are so many insurgencies there.
And separatist movements
there. So this is not Kashmir, and they are not Muslims. They are Christians, they are Buddhists, there are so many other. So this is one way of diverting attention, that look, our enemy is Pakistan. So whatever brutalities they perpetrate on their own people, then they conveniently divert the attention towards Pakistan. So this has been happening always. This is nothing new, and this is what they did in '71 also. I'm afraid we tend to forget what happened in '71. '71 was bad history, and it's solely because the Indians were behind it. They created an impression in the world that Pakistan is responsible for whatever is happening in its eastern wing, whereas they were financing the Mukti Bahini. So these are issues that we need to highlight again and again and again. And let me assure you, you can't keep your guards down. You have to keep your guards up, because you are up with an enemy up with a neighbor which only means ill will against you. That is how I feel.
Of course. So let's talk about how do you see the situation in Kashmir has evolved after the abrogation of Article 370 and 35?
It will continue. It will continue. See, if you don't give them the rights, the people will continue agitating and then continue demanding democracy. Sorry, not democracy, independence. So they are going to agitate for their rights. So it is in no way going to dampen their urge for getting out of the yoke of the Indians. You see, there's an occupation force over there. We forget that there are over 600,000 active military persons sitting over there, and they have special powers to do whatever and get away with murder, and they're using rape as an instrument of war. I think these things have been conveniently brushed under the carpet. They're going to hold their G20 tourism summit over there. These are the points that must be highlighted again and again and again at all forums.
Of course, we have to raise these issues, especially when we talk about Mr. Shahriyar, human rights violations and use of rape as a tool of war against, Kashmiri people. So how do you see the role of international community in such incidents that are taking place, and what should be done by other regional powers?
So Mariam, first of all, I don't understand how a G20 conference or a meeting on tourism can take place in world's largest open air prison. So what exactly is India trying to propagate by holding a tourism conference over there? When it comes to Kashmir, the whole global community knows that there are like over 600,000 military men subjugating a local population which cannot even leave their homes if there is a curfew that's like taking place. So I don't understand what kind of tourism is India promoting over there. Other than that, India consistently uses Pakistan as a bogeyman and basically riles up this whole rhetoric of terrorism to basically use that to subjugate the local population and basically assert its control and the human rights violation, which all of our fellow participants have like iterated over and over again. So those violations can only be justified if the enemy is external and if the attention of the enemy is outside India. So that gives India the justification to suppress the people inside its borders. So that's the strategy that India basically uses. And the Indian political establishment keeps on harping on Pakistan's alleged role in promoting militancy, but I don't understand, because like India's own ministers have basically consistently been admitting that there is no infiltration across LOC, it has decreased. So where is this like whole action by the indigenous groups coming from? So if everyone is like so happy and if everyone is so content in Kashmir, then where are these separatist movements rising from? And where is this like subjugation? And like even Human Rights Watch, International Crisis Group, Amnesty International, these are like international human rights watch groups that are consistently writing reports, and these reports are being presented in the UN forums, And you know, like I don't like understand how India can justify those reports, even if because Pakistan is not behind those reports, right?
So, Mr. Shehya, how do you see how has China's growing influence in the region has impacted or can impact the Pakistan-India relations?
So even though China and India also have like a lot of like border issues, and those border issues are much older and much more severe as compared to the issues that Pakistan and
India has
India has.
issues with all its neighbors.
All its
Pakistan is
neighbors.
no exception.
Pakistan has like resolved all of its border disputes with China, and they basically resolved the issues like back in like 50s, you know. And this like issue with like India and China is like still persisting. And obviously the recent conflicts, and China has been very assertive. China is a much bigger economy. China is has a much bigger military, and as we see that India has not really been able to control or subjugate or bully China as it has been able to do that with like Pakistan. So you see, like India also basically fears a nation which has like a much bigger economy, a much bigger geography, and this whole mentality that Pakistan, due to its smaller size, can be bullied, and that's like you're really creating a lot of like peace-related issues in the region.
Right. We will be talking more about these relations and its impact on the region, but after welcome back. We are exploring India-Pakistan relations and the impact of these relations on the region at large. Ambassador Naila, when we talk about these relations, of course, other major powers have also played a role in this region. But being most populous countries of the region, how do you see role of US in the region for that matter, and what are the implications of US role in this region for Pakistan and India?
Well, US has at times played positive and at times not that positive.
Right, paradoxical.
Yeah, kind of switch on and off depending on their interests. If you remember, when we became independent, we became part of the security pacts with USA. Our relationship with the USA is well founded since our independence. But subsequently we realized that when we are in difficult situation, our so-called friends are not there. So we came out of the pacts. Then we joined non-aligned, and we have been very articulate in non-aligned movement. But our relations with USA continued. Somehow they made it more transactional. When they needed us, they became our buddies. When their interests were over, like they left Afghanistan, then their interests were not there. But now again, they are warming up. They have expressed interest in cooperation, particularly in terms of counterterrorism, in the hybrid warfare, disinformation that emanates from our dear neighbor. You can see in EU, they identified
of course,
these
EU disinfo labs,
which showed how dedicated our enemy is to demonize, as Dr. Saab said, Pakistan, but it fails.
Of course.
It fails because Pakistan has always been very principled, very straightforward, and we have been persistent in our policy.
Of course.
While India has been fluctuating. Earlier on they were with Russian camp, then they left Russia, now they have joined Quad, and yet they are in SCO. I would say this is strategic deception. that they create. This is not strategic alliance, this is strategic deception.
Of course. So India is trying to create strategic deception, like Ambassador Naila has pointed out. Do you think India is trying to act as or trying to emerge as hegemon of this region? Because we see that India not only has issues with Pakistan, but all its neighbor. When we talk about Sri Lanka, China, Bhutan, all the countries have been impacted by India's designs.
Absolutely true. India has delusions of grandeur. If you read Nehru's book, Journey Through History, he's trying to say that India was a great country, it was a great empire. He harks upon Ashoka's empire, which extended from Kabul to Bali and things like that. I met Indians in which they have said that when you came, by that he meant invaders from Central Asia or the Arabian Peninsula. You disrupted our progress for 1,000 years. So they still very staunchly believe in that. So they want to emerge as a big country. They want to have their own perspective about the world. And if you have read the latest article by Ashley Tellis, who's an Indian, he says that they will also not ally with the United States of America. It's a bad bet, that's what he's saying. And Ashley Tellis is an Indian who has been used by the State Department for a very long time. So India is for nobody, India is for itself, right? It's a good policy, but you cannot use, as she said, this deception in your foreign policy. You see, when the Chinese struck back in 1962, Nehru was weeping actually, and he begged Kennedy to send a squadron of bombers along with pilots to help him. And when the Soviets came into Afghanistan, they very conveniently sided with them. They were the only country in the 1980 Olympics which sent their team to Moscow. The entire world boycotted it, but they sent their team. And when the Soviets were defeated and they left Afghanistan, they very conveniently jumped into the American laps. And so they have their own vision of themselves. They think that they are a great country. They are a great country, I have no doubt about it. But that doesn't mean that you try to fool me or you try to isolate me. That I would.
But India has always tried to fool, masses, its own people as well. How do you see that these narratives surrounding history of Pakistan and India have evolved over time, and how has these narratives impacted public perception of other country?
Okay, Ms. Zia, Bollywood is the world's biggest propaganda factory after Hollywood and now Netflix. So they try to spin a yarn about Pakistan that this is a country where terrorism is rife, where there's misogyny, where there is the minorities are being denied their rights. So they have been using it so effectively that their own people are convinced that Muslims are bad, that Muslims are terrorists. So they've been using these narratives, but if we try and let people see for themselves that that's not true, so then the things may improve. But that is why they don't give you visas. They don't let people to people contact. That's why they don't allow your singers to go, your actors to go, and worst of all, they don't allow your cricket team to go.
Of course, that is the recent example that India has backed off from playing Asia Cup.
That is criminal. You have to keep sports clean of politics. But these, I don't want to use a bad word, but these bad people they put politics into sports also. That is the kind of leaders that the Indians have. They don't mean well for their own people, they don't mean well for their neighbors.
Of course, and when we talk about these examples, we see that India has always tried such tactics to demonize Pakistan. But Mr. Shahyar, Pakistan has always taken positive steps for through cultural diplomacy as well. Opening of Kartarpur corridor is one of the key examples in 2019 when Kartarpur corridor was opened. How do you see the cultural exchange between the two countries in the past, and are there some examples that can be used to learn lessons from for the future?
So, Mariam, generally, as a rule, the politics of hatred never really wins. Pakistan has shown that it basically respects all religion, and especially with the Sikh community that's like residing in India, Pakistan basically came up with this like very magnanimous gesture. In Pakistan, when it opened the Kartarpur corridor, Pakistan spent a lot of money in basically upgrading upgrading and development of the corridor as well. And they also basically invested a lot in making the whole Gurdwara much bigger, so it could host a lot more religious tourists. And Pakistan hosts a huge Indian Sikh community every year. And I think like over 100,000 Sikh pilgrims come every year to Pakistan to visit their religious sites. So that's how open Pakistan is when it comes to religious tourism and supporting the Indian Sikhs to come and visit Pakistan. That reciprocity is not there on the Indian side. The visa regime is like super strict. They basically do not allow any people-to-people contact. So the people of Pakistan and India do not like get together and like resolve their issues at a bilateral and people-to-people level. So that's like something I feel that the Indian government and especially the BJP party is doing by design. Other than that, BJP has basically come up with this formula that if they want to win votes and if they want to hide their atrocities, hide their economic performance as well, they have to externalize the enemy. They have to basically say that most of the issues when it comes to security, when it comes to economics, they emanate from Pakistan. And Dr. Togrul is like very right. They use every propaganda that is in their toolbook to basically demonize Muslims. And when you basically perpetuate such politics of hatred, it also comes back inwards as well. And Dr. Togrul is very right that the Indian community or the Indian minority in India in itself is much larger than Pakistan's population. And that's what they always forget. And the mob lynchings that are happening with Muslims in India, the cow vigilantism that has increased tenfold in the last 10 years, people cannot like practice their religion. I'm not even just like talking about Muslims. They cannot like eat what they want. There's like a saffronization of their religious policies as well. Mobs basically enter Muslim communities, Muslim neighborhoods, and they lynch Muslims in front of like, you know, the whole population. So that coming from world's largest democracy, where human rights are not protected, where minorities are not protected, people cannot like practice their religion and their culture like freely. I don't like understand what kind of democracy India is projecting to the world. And when it comes to the US and India relationship, unfortunately, US basically sees India in this region as a linchpin against China. So the national security policy of the US that was launched last year basically sees India as a key player in the Indo-Pacific policy that has come up. They basically think India is a very important member of the Quad, and India will be used in this region to check China's rise. So if, and US is basically looking at India from their own foreign policy perspective, and unfortunately, human rights agenda does not basically take a lot of precedence in this case. This is very unfortunate.
Of course. So, Ambassador Naila, do you think US and other global powers have played their part as well in perpetuating this zero-sum game in India-Pakistan relations?
Yes and no. I would say yes and no, because each country plays its role according to its vested interests, and interests change according to the situation. So yes, India, despite blatant violations of international law, of International Security Council resolutions, has somehow managed to perpetuate its policies. Nevertheless, we should be mindful that the fact that these UN resolutions are still on the Security Council agenda is success of Pakistan's foreign policy. So we have also been very successful in keeping Indian designs at bay. Of course, they have hegemonic designs. Of course, they have a grandiose aspiration. But to be grandiose, you have to be grandiose in your spirit, which they lack.
Of course, and which they lack. Do you see there are some ways in which Pakistan and India can collaborate in future and move beyond this power politics and zero-sum game?
Of course, there are so many areas which are non-controversial. education for one. Why can't we allow our students and our faculty members from universities to study in each other's universities? Why can't we collaborate on matters related to climate? Climate is something which is affecting Pakistan badly, and India also is also not so well off. Sports, religion, there are so many things where we can collaborate which are non-controversial, and nobody is going to mind if we collaborate in those areas. But unfortunately, India does not want to collaborate with you on anything. That is the unfortunate part. So I think we can collaborate. As good neighbors, we can collaborate on a number of issues.
Of course. So as good neighbors, we can collaborate. Mr. Shehyar, what do you want to add in this?
So given this very recent experience and how India is basically taking forward these regional forums that are very important when it comes to stability, security, and economic development and prosperity of this region. This experience should prompt decision makers in Pakistan to adopt a wiser and a more pragmatic diplomatic course to make a strong case for Kashmiri human rights internationally. And there should also be this lobbying effort in which India also realizes that regional connectivity is the way forward in every region in the world. And if India wants to economically prosper, it cannot have a very unstable region and unstable relations with all of its neighbors up in the north and on the west.
Instability in the neighborhood as well, of course.
Instability in the neighborhood is in no one's interest. And if India wants to expand or expand its trade networks westwards, they all go through Pakistan. And if India continues this hegemonic and very ill treatment of Pakistan internationally, India in itself economically suffers. And that's what the Indian establishment and Indian politicians need to realize as well. There should be more people-to-people dialogue. And now SCO Leaders Summit is due to be held in India in July. And that will basically give another opportunity to India. And our foreign minister is correct that the onus and the burden is on India's side to basically mend the deteriorating relations and take this relationship and the agenda of regional peace forward.
Of course, take this agenda of mutual cooperation forward. Thank you very much, Mr. Shehyar, for joining in today's program. Thank you very much, Ambassador Naila Chauhan, for joining in today's program. Thank you very much, Dr. Tughral Jamin, for joining in today's program. As we conclude today's program, we are reminded of the complexities of Pakistan-India relations, and of course, we know that relations between the two countries are multifaceted with far-reaching consequences for the region. It is imperative that both countries work together for connectivity as well as for prosperity of the region, and now onus is on India to create this conducive environment for the talks. That's all from Game Changer tonight. Take care. Allah.